I took the DNA test because my sister dared me to. That was the stupidest part. Not because I wanted answers. Not because I suspected anything. Not because I had spent years staring at family photos wondering why my eyes were darker than my mother's, why my hair curled when everyone else's fell straight. Why my father sometimes looked at me like I was a question he had never learned how to answer. No. I took it because my younger sister, Brooke, laughed across my parents' kitchen island on Thanksgiving night and said, "Come on, Natalie. Don't be boring. We all know you're secretly adopted." Everybody laughed. My mother laughed the loudest. My father didn't laugh at all. I remember that now. At the time, I barely noticed. Dad had been quiet for months. Mom said it was work stress. Brooke said it was because he was getting old. I thought maybe he was just tired of pretending our family was normal. We were the Mercers of Willow Creek, Connecticut. Not famous, not exactly rich, but respected in that shiny suburban way where people knew our last name from school boards, charity dinners, and church fundraisers. My mother, Elaine Mercer, taught art history at the community college and wore silk scarves like armor. My father, Thomas Mercer, owned a small financial planning firm and believed emotions were private inconveniences. Brooke was 25, blonde, charming, and impossible to dislike unless you had shared a bathroom with her for 18 years. And me? I was Natalie Mercer. 29. Oldest daughter. The responsible one. The one who stayed after dinner to wash dishes. The one who remembered birthdays, paid bills on time, and apologized first even when she wasn't wrong. That Thanksgiving, Brooke brought 3 DNA kits as a family bonding activity. "Everyone's doing it," she said, sliding the boxes across the counter. "It tells you ancestry, relatives, health traits, all kinds of stuff." Mom wrinkled her nose. "I don't need a website telling me I'm Irish." "You're not Irish," Dad said quietly. Mom's smile froze for half a second. Brooke didn't catch it. She was already opening a kit. "Fine. Then we'll prove Mom has been lying about being Irish for attention." I smiled and took one. Dad looked straight at me. "Natalie," he said, "you don't have to do that." Something in his voice made me pause. Mom turned sharply. "Oh, Thomas. It's harmless." Dad looked at her then, and for 1 second, I saw something pass between them. Not love. Not annoyance. Fear. Then Mom clapped her hands and said, "Everybody spit." So we did. 3 little tubes. 3 little labels. 3 little boxes that should have meant nothing. I mailed mine the next morning and forgot about it. 6 weeks later, the email came. "Your DNA results are ready." I was at work, eating a sad salad at my desk, when I opened it. I expected boring. A little English, a little German, maybe one dramatic percentage that would let Brooke make jokes for the next 10 years. Instead, the first thing I saw was this: parent-child match, unknown user, 49.8% shared DNA. I frowned. My father hadn't taken the test. My mother hadn't either. Only Brooke and I had. I clicked the match. The user's name was listed as Daniel R. Vale. I stared at it. I didn't know anyone named Daniel Vale. Below his name was another result. Close family match, Brooke Mercer, 24.9% shared DNA. Half-sibling. Not full sibling. Half. For a full minute, I didn't move. The office around me kept going. Phones rang. Someone laughed near the printer. My manager asked if anyone had seen the quarterly report. But my whole life had narrowed into one cold sentence glowing on my laptop screen. Brooke Mercer was not my full sister. And Thomas Mercer was not my biological father. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. That's what people do when the truth walks into the room too suddenly. They call it a mistake. They tell themselves technology fails. Labels get switched. Databases confuse people. Life cannot be undone by an email. I refreshed the page. Nothing changed. I logged out and logged back in. Daniel R. Vale was still my parent. Brooke was still only my half-sister. My father was nowhere. I closed the laptop and walked to the bathroom. Inside a stall, I sat fully clothed on the toilet lid and tried to breathe. My first thought was that my mother had cheated. My second thought was that my father knew. My third thought was that everyone knew except me. By the time I got home that evening, I had searched Daniel Vale online 17 different ways. Daniel Robert Vale. Age 58. Currently living in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Former pediatric surgeon. Divorced. No criminal record. No social media except an old hospital profile with a grainy headshot. I clicked on the picture and felt my stomach drop. He had my eyes. Not kind of. Exactly. Dark brown, almost black, with a small downward tilt at the outer corners. Eyes I had spent my life thinking came from nowhere. I printed the DNA results because holding paper made it feel less like madness. Then I drove to my parents' house. I did not call first. Their porch light was on. Mom had already decorated for Christmas even though it was only January. A wreath with silver ribbon hung on the red front door. Through the window, I saw my father sitting in his armchair, staring at the fireplace. For a moment, I almost left. Then my mother appeared behind him, holding a glass of wine, and said something I couldn't hear. Dad didn't respond. I rang the bell. Mom opened the door wearing a cream sweater and pearl earrings, looking exactly like the kind of woman who had never made a mistake in her life. Natalie, she said, surprised. Honey, what are you doing here? I lifted the printed pages. Her face changed before she even read them. That was how I knew. Not suspected. Knew? Where's Dad? I asked. In the living room. I need both of you. Natalie, both of you. She stepped back. I walked inside. Dad looked up when I entered. When he saw the papers in my hand, he closed his eyes. Not confused. Not curious. Defeated. That hurt more than the DNA result. I stood between them in the living room where we had opened Christmas gifts, watched movies, posed for family photos, and performed happiness for relatives. Who is Daniel Vale? I asked. Mom's wineglass trembled. Dad looked at the floor. Natalie, Mom said softly, these tests are not always accurate. Don't. It could be a database error. Don't. She swallowed. I turned to my father. Dad? He flinched when I called him that. I had never seen him flinch from anything before. Please, I whispered. Say something. He looked at my mother. She shook her head once. That single movement told me everything about their marriage. She commanded. He obeyed. But that night, for the first time in my life, my father disobeyed her. Daniel Vale is your biological father, he said. The room went silent. My mother made a sound like she had been slapped. I stared at him. You knew. He nodded slowly. How long? His voice broke. Since before you were born. The words hit me so hard I had to sit down. Before I was born. Not discovered later. Not found out by accident. Known. Planned. Carried. Hidden. You raised me knowing I wasn't yours. Dad's eyes filled with tears. I had seen my father cry only once before, at his mother's funeral. Even then, he had done it silently, angrily, as if grief had offended him. I raised you because you were mine, he said. Mom snapped, Thomas. He ignored her. I turned to my mother. Did you have an affair? Her face hardened. It was complicated. No. Tax law is complicated. This is simple. Did you sleep with him while married to Dad? Natalie, lower your voice. I laughed. It came out ugly. You lied to me for 29 years, and you're worried about volume. Dad stood. Elaine, tell her. Mom's eyes flashed. No, tell her, or I will. She looked at him with pure hatred. I had never seen my mother look at anyone that way. Not even me when I dropped out of law school. Not even Brooke when she totaled Mom's Volvo. This was older. Deeper. A hatred that had roots. Dad turned to me. There's more. My skin went cold. More? That is the cruelest word in any family secret. What more? Dad opened his mouth. Before he could speak, Mom threw her wineglass at the fireplace. It shattered against the brick. Enough, she screamed. I jumped. Dad didn't. Mom stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, pearls trembling against her throat. You think you deserve the truth, she said to me. I stared at her. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You come here with your little papers and your wounded face, acting like we stole something from you. You did. No, she said. I saved you. Dad whispered, Elaine. Mom pointed at him. Do not say another word. Then she looked back at me. Daniel Vale did not want you. My chest tightened. That's a lie, Dad said. Mom whirled on him. You know nothing. I know enough. You know what I allowed you to know. The room seemed to tilt. I stood slowly. What does that mean? Mom's face changed again. The anger drained from it, leaving something colder. Control. Natalie, go home. No, go home, sleep, and we'll discuss this calmly tomorrow. No, her lips thinned. You have always had a talent for making things dramatic. I almost smiled. There it was. The old family script. Natalie overreacts. Natalie is too sensitive. Natalie makes things difficult. But this time, I had proof in my hand. This is not my drama, I said. It's your lie. Dad moved toward me. Natalie, I need to show you something. Mom grabbed his arm. Thomas. He pulled away from her. That was when I realized my father was afraid of my mother. Not annoyed. Not exhausted. Afraid. He walked to the bookshelf, reached behind a row of old photo albums, and removed a small brass key. Mom went pale. Thomas, if you open that cabinet, I will never forgive you. He looked at her sadly. You already didn't. Then he crossed the room to an antique writing desk that had belonged to my grandmother. It had always been locked. When Brooke and I were kids, Mom told us it held tax documents and boring adult things. Dad unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a manila envelope. Yellowed. Thick. He handed it to me. My name was written across the front. Not Natalie. Nora. I frowned. Who's Nora? Dad's face crumpled. Mom closed her eyes. My hands began to shake. I opened the envelope. The first thing inside was a birth certificate. Not mine. A baby girl born at St. Catherine's Hospital on March 14, 1995. Name, Nora Elizabeth Vale. Mother, Marissa Claire Vale. Father, Daniel Robert Vale. I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. Marissa Vale. Not Elaine Mercer. Daniel Vale. Not Thomas Mercer. Nora. Not Natalie. I looked up. Nobody spoke. My voice came out barely above a whisper. Who is Marissa? Dad wiped his face. Your mother. The floor disappeared beneath me. I could hear my pulse in my ears. A low roaring sound. Like ocean water. Like a storm. No, I said. Mom said nothing. Dad looked destroyed. No, I repeated. Elaine is my mother. Mom's mouth tightened, but she did not claim me. That silence did what no words could. It killed my childhood. I backed away from them, gripping the birth certificate. Who am I? Dad stepped closer. You are my daughter. No. Who am I? Mom finally spoke. You were a problem, she said. Dad shouted, Elaine. She turned on him. What? Should we keep pretending? Isn't that what you're tired of? Fine. Let's stop pretending. Then she looked at me with eyes I no longer recognized. Your real mother was my younger sister. The words moved through me slowly, cutting everything they touched. Sister? I whispered. Mom nodded once. Marissa. I had heard that name before. Not often. Only in fragments. A framed photo missing from Grandma's hallway. A whispered argument at Christmas. My mother leaving the room whenever someone mentioned Rissa. When I was 10, I asked about her. Mom told me Aunt Marissa died before I was born. That was the only truth she ever gave me. She died? I asked. Mom's smile was thin. Eventually. Dad looked sick. I turned to him. What does that mean? He took a breath. Marissa didn't die before you were born. She died 2 days after. My knees weakened. I sat on the edge of the sofa because standing felt impossible. Dad continued, voice shaking. She and Daniel were married. They lived in New Haven. Marissa went into labor early. There were complications. You were born healthy, but Marissa hemorrhaged. She died after surgery. I looked at Mom. Her face was blank. Daniel was devastated, Dad said. He had just lost his wife. He was alone with a newborn. Mom cut in. He was unstable. He was grieving. He was a danger. Dad shook his head. No. You told everyone that. I looked between them. What happened? Dad swallowed hard. Your mother, Elaine, had suffered a miscarriage 6 months earlier. Mom's jaw tightened. We had tried for years to have another child after Brooke, Dad said. Elaine wanted a second daughter desperately. When Marissa died, Elaine went to the hospital to help Daniel. She came home with you. I stared at him. The words made no sense. She came home with me. Dad nodded, tears slipping down his face. She said Daniel had signed temporary guardianship papers. She said he was too broken to care for you and wanted family to take you until he recovered. Did he? Dad looked at the floor. No, the room went very still. My mother said he would have ruined her. Dad snapped, she was his child. She was Marissa's child. Mom screamed. My sister's child. My blood. And Daniel's. He killed her. Dad looked exhausted. No, Elaine. Marissa died in childbirth. Daniel did not kill her. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but they were angry tears. Selfish tears. He took her from us, she hissed. He took my sister. He filled her head with dreams and dragged her away from this family. She would still be alive if not for him. That's not true, Dad said. Mom ignored him. She looked at me. You were all I had left of her. A sick part of me wanted to feel sympathy. I could almost see it. My mother losing a pregnancy. Losing her sister. Seeing me, a newborn with Marissa's blood, and confusing grief with love. But then I remembered 29 years. 29 birthdays with the wrong name. 29 years of calling another woman mom. 29 years stolen from Daniel Vale. What did you do? I asked. Mom lifted her chin. I protected you. No. What did you do? Dad answered. She forged the paperwork. My breath stopped. She used an old contact at the hospital. A nurse who owed Elaine's father money. They altered records. Daniel was told you developed respiratory distress and died. The birth certificate fell from my hand. Died. Daniel Vale had buried me while I was alive. I stood so fast the room spun. He thought I was dead. Dad nodded. For 29 years. Dad could barely speak. Yes. I turned to my mother. There are different kinds of silence. Some are peaceful. Some are empty. The silence inside me then was violent. You let him bury his daughter. Mom's voice was ice. He buried a closed casket. I slapped her. I didn't think. I didn't plan. My hand moved before the rest of me understood. The sound cracked through the room. Dad froze. Mom slowly turned her face back toward me, cheek reddening. For the first time in my life, she looked at me not like a daughter, not even like a problem. Like an enemy. You ungrateful little thing, she whispered. I laughed through tears. I'm ungrateful. I gave you a life. You stole one. I loved you. No, I said. You possessed me. Dad stepped between us. Natalie, I flinched. He stopped. My name hung there. Natalie. A costume. A lie. A dead girl's replacement. My name is Nora, I said. Mom's face twisted. Your name is Natalie Mercer. No, I whispered. It never was. I grabbed the envelope and walked out. Dad followed me to the porch. Natalie, Nora. Please. I turned. He looked older than he had an hour ago. Did Brooke know? I asked. He shook his head. No, does anyone know? Your grandmother knew. Elaine's father knew. The hospital nurse knew. She died years ago. And you? He closed his eyes. I knew enough to be guilty. That was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. Why didn't you tell me? He looked at me with such pain that for one moment, I almost hated myself for asking. Then he said, because I loved you, and I was a coward. I drove home in a blur. At midnight, I found Daniel Vale's address. At 12:17, I wrote him an email. My name is Natalie Mercer, but I believe I was born Nora Elizabeth Vale. I took a DNA test. It says you are my biological father. I have documents. I think you were told I died. I am sorry to contact you like this, but I need to know the truth. I did not expect him to respond. He responded in 6 minutes. Where are you? That was all. No greeting. No disbelief. No explanation. Just 3 words. I stared at them, then typed my town. His next reply came immediately. Do not tell Elaine you contacted me. I'm coming. I didn't sleep. At 5:43 a.m., headlights swept across my apartment window. I opened the door before he knocked. Daniel Vale stood in the hallway wearing a dark coat, his hair silver at the temples, his face pale and hollow with shock. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said one word. Nora. My body broke. Not because I knew him. I didn't. Not because he had raised me. He hadn't. But because no one had ever said my real name before. I started crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Daniel stepped forward, stopped himself, and asked, "May I?" That question destroyed me all over again. My whole life, Elaine had touched me when she wanted to fix my collar, pose me for photos, pull me into performances of family. Thomas had hugged me stiffly, apologetically. Brooke had thrown herself on me whenever she needed comfort. Nobody had ever asked. I nodded. Daniel wrapped his arms around me carefully, like I was both his child and a ghost. He cried silently. I buried you, he whispered. I buried an empty box. We sat at my kitchen table until sunrise. He told me everything. He had met Marissa Mercer in medical school. She was brilliant, impulsive, funny. She painted murals on apartment walls and danced barefoot in grocery aisles. Elaine hated him from the beginning because Marissa chose him over the family's approval. When Marissa got pregnant, she was happy. Daniel showed me a photo. My mother. My real mother. She had my smile. Not Elaine's tight social smile. Not the careful expression I used in family photos. My real smile. Wide. Crooked. Alive. I touched the picture with shaking fingers. Daniel told me about the night I was born. Marissa bleeding. Doctors rushing. Elaine arriving at the hospital before dawn. Thomas coming later. Daniel holding me in one arm while signing forms with the other, destroyed and sleep-deprived. Then Elaine offered to take me for a few hours so he could rest. A few hours became forever. When he woke, they told him I was in the NICU. Then they told him I had died. He demanded to see me. They said my body was too fragile. Too damaged. Elaine stood beside him the whole time, crying, holding his hand, telling him Marissa would want him to let me go peacefully. The funeral was 2 days later. Closed casket. Small service. Elaine arranged everything. A month later, Daniel collapsed. He left the hospital, left Connecticut, and spent years barely surviving. Eventually, he returned to medicine but never remarried. Never had another child. I searched once, he said. About 10 years later. Something about it never felt right. But the records were sealed. The nurse was gone. Elaine threatened to have me charged with harassment if I contacted the family again. His hands trembled around his coffee cup. I thought I was losing my mind. You weren't, I said. He looked at me, and I saw the lost years between us like a wall neither of us had built, but both had been forced to leave behind. At 8 a.m., my phone began ringing. Brooke? I didn't answer. Then Dad. Then Mom. Then Brooke again. Finally, a text from Brooke appeared. What the hell is going on? Mom says you attacked her and Dad is crying in the garage. I almost laughed. That was Elaine's version. I attacked her. Dad was crying. No mention of kidnapping. Forgery. A stolen baby. An empty coffin. Daniel watched my face. You don't have to face them today. Yes, I said. I do. By noon, everyone knew something was wrong. By 4, the family group chat had exploded. Mom sent one message. Natalie is having a mental health crisis. Please do not engage with her until Thomas and I can get her help. There it was. The trap. Make me unstable before I could make her exposed. Aunt Karen called me. Uncle Paul texted. Cousins I barely knew asked if I was okay. Brooke left a voicemail sobbing. Natalie, please call me. Mom says you're saying crazy things about not being her daughter. I don't understand. Please. I sat on my couch beside Daniel, listening to my sister cry, and realized Elaine was already rewriting the story. Again. So I did something I had never done before. I stopped protecting the family. I scanned every document from the envelope. The birth certificate. The altered hospital paperwork. A letter Thomas had written years ago, but never sent, confessing what Elaine had done. A photo of Marissa holding her pregnant belly. A hospital bracelet with the name Nora Vale. Then I posted them in the family group chat. Underneath, I wrote, my real name is Nora Elizabeth Vale. Elaine Mercer stole me from my biological father after my mother, Marissa Vale, died giving birth to me. Thomas knew and stayed silent. Daniel Vale was told I died and buried an empty casket. Do not call me unstable. Call me by my name. For 11 seconds, nothing happened. Then the family exploded. Aunt Karen, what is this? Uncle Paul, Elaine. Cousin Megan, is this real? Brooke, Mom? Dad, I'm sorry. That was all. I'm sorry. 2 words, 29 years late. Elaine did not respond. Instead, she came to my apartment. At 6:30 p.m., she pounded on my door hard enough to shake the frame. Natalie. Open this door. Daniel stood. I said, no. Let me. I opened the door with the chain still locked. Elaine stood in the hallway, hair perfect, makeup perfect, eyes wild. When she saw Daniel behind me, something ugly crossed her face. You, she breathed. Daniel stepped forward. Elaine. She pointed at him. You don't get to come back and take her. He looked at her with quiet devastation. You already took her from me. She is mine. I felt those words like a hand around my throat. I unlatched the chain and opened the door fully. No, I said. I'm not. Elaine looked at me as if I had betrayed her. Natalie, you are confused. My name is Nora. Stop saying that. Nora Elizabeth Vale. Her face cracked. You think he loves you, she said, pointing at Daniel. He loves a dead baby. He doesn't know you. I raised you. I fed you. I stayed up when you were sick. I went to your recitals. I packed your lunches. I made you. You renamed me. I saved you. You stole me. Her breathing turned ragged. Then she said the thing that finished whatever part of me still wanted her to be redeemable. If Marissa had wanted you to stay with Daniel, she shouldn't have died. Daniel went white. I had never seen rage move through a person so quietly. His whole body changed, but his voice stayed calm. Leave, he said. Elaine laughed. This is between me and my daughter. I'm not your daughter, I said. She slapped me. It happened fast. Sharp. Familiar. Not because she had hit me often before. She hadn't. Elaine's violence was usually cleaner than that. Words. Shame. Silence. But the slap felt like childhood anyway. Daniel moved between us. Elaine stepped back, suddenly aware of what she had done in front of a witness. I touched my cheek. Then I smiled. Elaine looked frightened. Good. Thank you, I said. For what? She snapped. For giving me the last thing I needed. I called the police. 2 weeks later, Elaine Mercer was arrested. The charges were complicated. Kidnapping. Fraud. Falsification of records. Conspiracy. Obstruction. The district attorney said the age of the case made everything difficult, but not impossible. The DNA test, documents, Thomas's confession, and Daniel's testimony created enough pressure that the story became impossible to bury. And then the media found out. Local woman accused of stealing sister's newborn after hospital death. The headlines were everywhere. Willow Creek turned vicious overnight. People who had eaten Elaine's lemon bars at church suddenly claimed they had always sensed something was off. Women who complimented her scarves whispered in grocery aisles. The college placed her on leave. The charity board removed her photo from its website by Friday. Brooke didn't speak to me for 9 days. When she finally came to my apartment, she looked like someone had hollowed her out. Daniel offered to leave, but I asked him to stay in the next room. Brooke stood in my doorway, arms wrapped around herself. Is it true? She asked. I nodded. All of it? Yes. Her face crumpled. I expected anger. Accusations. Maybe jealousy that the family tragedy had made me the center of attention for once. Instead, she whispered, so Mom lied to me too. That broke something open in me. Because Brooke had been loved by Elaine. Favored, spoiled, defended. But even she had been living inside the lie. Yes, I said. Brooke sat on my sofa and cried into her hands. I thought you hated us, she said. I thought you were all I had. She looked up. Do you hate me? I thought about that. Did I hate Brooke? I had resented her. Envied her. Blamed her sometimes because it was easier than blaming the parents who made us compete for oxygen. But Brooke had been a child too. A child raised by a woman who could steal a baby and call it love. No, I said. But I don't know how to be your sister right now. She nodded, crying harder. I don't know how to be anyone right now. That was the most honest thing either of us had ever said to each other. Thomas moved out of the house a month later. He came to see me once before Elaine's first court hearing. We met at a park because I didn't want him in my apartment, and I didn't want to sit across from him in a restaurant pretending this was normal. He looked smaller. His clothes hung loose. His wedding ring was gone. I've given a full statement, he said. Everything I remember. Everything I helped cover. Why now? He looked at the ground. Because you posted the truth before Elaine could bury it again. I nodded. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check. A large one. I stared at it. What is this? Money from your college fund. I laughed bitterly. I went to state school and worked 2 jobs. I know. Then whose college fund was it? His eyes filled with shame. Yours. Before Elaine changed the accounts. I folded the check and put it back in the envelope. I don't want guilt money. It's not guilt money. Yes, it is. He didn't argue. I looked at the man who had raised me. The man who had tucked me in, taught me to drive, criticized my report cards, walked me halfway down the aisle at my almost wedding before I called it off. He was not my father by blood. But he had been my father by choice. And then by cowardice. That was harder to understand than hate. Did you love me? I asked. His face broke. Yes. Did you love me enough to tell the truth? He closed his eyes. No, there it was. The whole tragedy in one word. I stood. Then that's what I'll remember. 6 months later, Elaine pleaded guilty to reduced charges. Her lawyer argued grief, trauma, mental instability after miscarriage and losing her sister. He painted her as a broken woman who made one terrible decision and then became trapped by it. Daniel sat beside me in the courtroom, hands clenched. Brooke sat on my other side. Thomas sat behind us. For the first time in my life, my family was arranged around the truth instead of the lie. Elaine stood before the judge in a navy suit, pearls at her throat, still trying to look misunderstood instead of monstrous. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she turned toward me. For one ridiculous second, I hoped she would apologize. Not because I needed it. Because some childish part of me still wanted proof that love had existed somewhere inside the theft. Elaine looked directly at me. I loved you more than he ever could have, she said. Daniel inhaled sharply. I stood before anyone could stop me. The judge looked at me. Ms. Vale. Ms. Vale. Not Mercer. Vale. Yes, Your Honor, I said. May I respond? After a pause, she allowed it. I faced Elaine. You keep calling what you did love. But love does not require a forged birth certificate. Love does not need an empty coffin. Love does not erase a mother, bury a child alive, and let a father grieve for 29 years. What you loved was control. What you protected was your lie. And what you destroyed was not just my life. You destroyed Daniel's. You destroyed Marissa's memory. You destroyed Brooke's trust. You destroyed Thomas's soul. You destroyed this family, and you still want credit for raising the child you stole. Elaine's face hardened. I continued. My name is Nora Elizabeth Vale. I am Marissa's daughter. I am Daniel's daughter. I was never yours to keep. The courtroom was silent. Elaine looked away first. That was the closest thing to victory I got. She was sentenced to prison. Not long enough. It never is. There is no sentence that gives back a childhood. No prison term that returns bedtime stories, first steps, birthdays, scraped knees, school plays, ordinary mornings. Daniel and I had to build our relationship out of ruins. At first, it was awkward. Painful. We were strangers with matching eyes and a grief too large to hold politely. He wanted to know everything. My favorite food. My first word. Whether I liked coffee. What books I read. What music I hated. What scared me. What made me laugh. I wanted to know everything too. What Marissa sounded like when she laughed. Whether she had wanted a boy or a girl. Whether she had held me before she died. Daniel told me she had. She held you for almost 11 minutes, he said one night, voice trembling. She named you Nora after her grandmother. Elizabeth after mine. She kissed your forehead and said, "She looks like trouble." I laughed and cried at the same time. He showed me Marissa's paintings. Her journals. A box of baby clothes she had bought before I was born. Tiny yellow socks. A white blanket with moons embroidered along the edge. I slept with that blanket near my pillow for 3 weeks. Brooke and I changed slowly. We stopped pretending we were fine. We stopped forcing sisterhood into easy shapes. Some days we texted like nothing had happened. Some days we went silent for weeks. But one afternoon, nearly a year after the DNA results, she came over holding 2 coffees and said, "I don't know what we are now, but I still know you hate hazelnut syrup." I took the cup. It was black coffee. I smiled. That's a start. Thomas wrote me letters. At first, I didn't read them. Then, one winter night, I opened the first. He did not ask for forgiveness. That helped. He wrote about my first bike. About the time I hid under the dining table during a thunderstorm. About how he almost told me the truth when I was 16, after I screamed that I didn't belong in the family. I remembered that fight. Elaine had told me I was being dramatic. Thomas had said nothing. In the letter, he wrote, "I knew you were right." I hated myself for staying quiet. I cried for the father he could have been. Then I folded the letter and put it away. Forgiveness, I learned, is not a door you walk through once. Sometimes it is a house you never enter. Sometimes you only stand outside and admit the house exists. 1 year after the DNA test, I legally changed my name. Nora Elizabeth Vale. Daniel came with me to the courthouse. Brooke came too. Thomas waited outside, unsure if he was welcome. I saw him standing near the steps, holding flowers like an apology he didn't know how to give. After the paperwork was finalized, I walked outside. He looked nervous. "I didn't want to intrude," he said. I took the flowers. "Thank you, Thomas." It was the first time I had ever called him by his name. Pain flickered across his face, but he nodded. "You look like her," he said softly. "Marissa?" "Yes." For once, hearing about resemblance didn't make me feel misplaced. It made me feel found. That evening, Daniel and I drove to the cemetery. For 29 years, there had been a small grave with my name on it. Nora Elizabeth Vale. Beloved daughter. March 14, 1995 to March 16, 1995. I stood in front of it for a long time. The grave was real. The death was not. Daniel placed flowers beside the stone. His hands shook. "I came here every year," he said. I took his hand. "I'm here now." He covered his face and cried. I looked at the name carved into stone, the name stolen from me, buried without me, waiting patiently beneath 29 years of lies. Then I knelt and touched the cold marble. For most of my life, I thought family was something you had to survive. A room where everyone knew the rules except you. A table where love was served unevenly. A story written by the person who lied best. But that DNA test, the one I took for fun, did not destroy my family. Not really. The family had already been destroyed before I was old enough to speak. The test only turned on the lights. And once the lights were on, nobody could pretend they didn't see the blood on the floor. My mother was dead. My father was alive. My sister was broken. The woman who raised me was in prison. The man who stayed silent was alone. And me? I was not Natalie Mercer anymore. I was Nora Vale. The stolen daughter. The buried child. The family secret that survived. And for the first time in my life, I finally knew who I was.